Hola amores, what's up guys? It is Christina, tu vecina favorita que maquilla, and in today's Let's Chat video, I wanted to talk about why I feel culture is important. So if you'd like to hear my opinion on this, just keep on watching. So in my opinion, I believe that culture is something that supersedes race. Race is something that is so broad. And, even within each race, there's, so many different cultures. I mean, just think about how many different Asian cultures there are, how many different Black cultures, different white cultures, etc. So, I feel like in that, because of that, it's easier and it just makes more sense to me to identify more with culture than with race. Now, if you are someone that takes a lot of pride in your race and that is how you identify, I mean, that's perfectly fine too. You can certainly be proud to be Black, proud to be white, proud to be whatever you are. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like sometimes, especially when it comes to like mixed race people and they may not necessarily know which side to identify with, or you're like in a society where it's kind of expected that you choose one side or the other. I feel like it's just easier to identify with culture. So I just wanted to give a quick definition of what culture is. And, this word culture is not just limited to like ethnic and racial groups. I mean, you hear about like workplace culture, guy culture, girl culture, gay culture. I mean, anything can have a culture to it. But usually it's mostly associated with like, ethnic cultures. So culture, one definition I have here is it is the customary beliefs, social forms, and values shared by a religious, racial, ethnic, or social group. And it can also be defined as shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterize an institution or an organization. So that would be more like workplace culture. So the reason why I feel that culture is important is because I feel that it gives us a sense of identity. It's something that, it influences our behavior. And it's kind of like this invisible bond that ties people together. I know for me as a Dominican, it's like when I find other Dominicans either online or other Dominican YouTubers, it's like I instantly feel like this kind of bond with them. And that is because of the shared culture that we have. And, I feel like there are certain values, just certain views that, as Dominican people, we share. And of course, they're not just exclusive to Dominicans, but, when I think of Dominican people, I think of, strong family values. I think of, people that like to have fun, that like to enjoy themselves, that are, pretty much can get along with anyone. Because that's, what I've always seen, with myself and with my family. We're very easygoing people. And I feel like a lot of Dominicans are that way. And another thing is, I feel like using the Oregon as an example, when it comes to a culture in which there's like different mixes of races, and this pretty much could also be said about most of Latin American countries because Latin America is such like a melting pot of so many different races, even within each country. It's very few countries that have like just one overwhelming race. I feel like in cases like that, it's better to just identify by your culture or your nationality versus race, because I feel like when you start identifying too much with race and you start trying to polarize people by their race, then that's when, division starts to arise, basically like, the US. And feelings of superiority follow because, white is right. That's kind of like a global mindset. And DR is not exempt from that. So when it comes to like race, from a Dominican perspective, I prefer to stay more neutral when it comes to that. Because I feel like at the end of the day, because we can be either more white or more European or more in the middle, it's better to just identify by our culture. I feel like that bonds us together much more than identifying with one race over the other. Now, of course, here in the US, it's a bit different because just of racial history in this country, and there being very separate racial groups up until more recently, where there is a lot more cross-racial mixing. So I mean, here it's different. But so here you have like a distinct, white American culture, a very distinct African American culture, and even past racial, there's different geographic cultures. I feel like, the Northeast, or for example, there's like a very distinct New York culture. There's a very distinct Southern culture, and even like a distinct West Coast culture. And you see that people take pride in those things as well. And, I'm the type of person, I've said this before, but, I love sharing my culture, and I love learning about other people's cultures as well. I mean, for me, apart from Dominican culture, which is what, I grew up with, especially when it comes to like music and dance, I have to say the next culture whose music and dance I've enjoyed the most is African American culture. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, so I grew up listening to a lot of like R&B. I mean, who doesn't love 90s R&B? And different hip hop and stuff. And I've enjoyed it. And I like that I've been able to share my Dominican culture with my African American friends, but at the same time enjoy their culture with them as well. I've also been exposed to Asian culture. My church is like, it's all races, but there's a lot of Asian people there. So, all growing up, I would go to like, church home meetings and stuff in some of their houses. And so I got exposed to like the Asian culture too. One of my best friends in elementary school was Korean. And then moving on into high school, I had a lot of East African friends, mainly Sudanese. So, I learned a little bit of like Arabic words. I learned some of their music. So, I mean, I love that type of stuff. And of course, once I graduated high school and started clubbing, I've said this before in like a previous video about being Caribbean, but that's when I really got into like reggae and dance hall. I love all that like Jamaican type of music. So again, I love experiencing other cultures as well. Just recently, I even discovered Afro beats, which I never really listened to before. So I've discovered a few artists there too. So, I feel like, within each culture, we have, our own art, literature, music, dance. And, I think these are things to be, very proud of. As a Dominican, I'm very proud of our music, of, merengue, bachata. I'm proud of like some of the artists that have come out of DR. And, I take pride in being Dominican and in what that means. Granted, we have, our negative stereotypes, and, every group does. But, I try not to focus too much on that, and to just take, pride in who I am, the culture that I come from. And I think it's important to know the history of your unique culture, whether you're, Dominican or from another country in Latin America, or even here in the US. I feel like for African Americans especially, it's important that they know a lot of their history, because, their history is like a huge part of American history in general, and we only learn but so much at school, Yeah, so I think it's important to have cultural knowledge and awareness of other people's cultures as well. But going back to the race thing, I do think it's important that, well, depending on where you are, that you do have an awareness of your race or the race you may be perceived as. Just to be aware of certain implications that may come with that, or certain behaviors or attitudes that may be displayed towards you because of your race. So, I do think that's necessary. So I'm not saying like totally disregard race at all, but I do feel like identifying with culture, it outweighs identifying with race. So at the end of the day, I feel like every culture, every subculture within a country, it's unique and beautiful in its own way. I feel like there's a lot of things that we can learn from each other, that we can enjoy from each other's cultures. I definitely don't think like you should close yourself in only to your specific culture. You know, I think it's good to kind of like expand your horizons and see what else is out there, you know. So that was it for this video, guys. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts on this topic as well. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.